Have you ever felt like time itself is exhausting you?
Oh, that is such a familiar feeling for so many people.
Right, and I don't just mean your daily schedule. I'm not talking about the back-to-back meetings or the endless emails or the kids' soccer practices.
Normal burnout.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the actual fundamental rhythm of the days and the months. That creeping underlying feeling that the way we measure our existence is somehow actively working against you.
Like the very grid we use to organize reality is flawed.
Yes. If you've ever felt that subtle, persistent drag, you're going to want to settle in, because welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a truly mind-bending, reality-questioning document called the Tempusnuo Manifesto.
It really is a text that leaves almost no foundational stone unturned. We're talking about our baseline assumptions regarding time, history, and even the literal physical space we inhabit.
And we have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. The manifesto we're looking at was authored by a writer known as G. Yeager. It was published in 2026, though its conceptual roots apparently trace all the way back to specific esoteric circles in Austria in 1978.
Which is a fascinating lineage on its own.
It is, and it proposes a radical thesis. It argues that the calendar we use every single day, the Gregorian calendar, isn't just mathematically clunky. Yeager argues that it is a deliberate, meticulously constructed psychological cage.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we are looking at a text that is absolutely massive in its scope.
Massive is the right word.
It spans astronomy, biology, alternative history, and some incredibly deep esoteric philosophy. It goes far beyond just suggesting we change how we count days or tweak a leap year.
Right. It suggests that the reality we live in and the time we track has been engineered by forces that do not necessarily have our best interests at heart.
And right at the top, we need to establish exactly how we're going to navigate this material.
Yes, very important.
The Tempusnuo Manifesto touches on highly charged religious, historical, and structural themes.
Extremely charged. So our approach today is to impartially explore these radical ideas, not as endorsed facts, but as a fascinating lens through which to view humanity's relationship with time.
Exactly. Our goal is simply to convey the ideas contained in the original source material. We aren't here to take sides on alternative history or religious dogma.
We are acting as your guides through a very complex, deeply layered philosophical and architectural argument.
And the reason you, the listener, should care about a manifesto that challenges the nature of time is actually quite grounded.
It affects every single day of your life.
Because if this text is even partially accurate in its psychological assessments, the way you experience stress, the way you structure your work, and the way you desperately try to rest on a weekend are all being heavily influenced by a completely arbitrary and possibly malicious grid of numbers.
We just accept it because it's the water we swim in. Yeager's framework asks us to view a calendar not just as a neutral tool for tracking when a bill is due, but as the fundamental geometry with which a civilization measures its own existence.
That's a great way to phrase it.
When that rhythm is imposed from the outside, when it is entirely disconnected from natural biological cycles, it becomes invisible scaffolding that dictates how you think and feel.
The craziest part is how glaringly obvious the bars of this cage are once you actually look at them. The manifesto points out the completely normalized absurdities of our current calendar that we all just gloss over.
The linguistic disconnects are staggering.
Take the names of the months. September, October, November, and December. Anyone with a passing knowledge of Latin roots knows those prefixes literally mean 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Septem, Octo, Novem, Decem.
Yet they are our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th months.
It is a profound linguistic dissonance. We teach children to write a 9 for September, a word that fundamentally screams 7, and our cognitive processing simply buries the error.
Historically, the standard academic explanation is that under the early Roman kings, the year began in March. Later, January and February were inserted at the beginning of the year, which shifted the other months 2 positions forward, and the Roman authorities just never bothered to rename them.
But the manifesto refuses to accept that as just a quirky historical oversight. Yeager views this as a symptom of a much larger, intentional temporal distortion.
Because why would an empire as meticulous as Rome, an empire completely obsessed with order and administration, just leave an error like that hanging around for millennia?
It doesn't track with Roman efficiency. And that leads us to the most striking example of temporal manipulation in the text, which happened in October of 1582.
The shift from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar.
Exactly. Pope Gregory XIII, working alongside an astronomer named Luigi Lelio and a Jesuit mathematician named Christoph Clavius, implemented a change to fix a seasonal drift.
Because the Julian calendar was slightly off, right?
Yes, it had accumulated a drift from the actual solar year of about 11 minutes per year. Over centuries, this pushed the date of Easter dangerously out of alignment with the spring equinox.
But their solution wasn't to gradually shift things over a few years. It was a surgical, blunt force trauma to time itself.
It was incredibly abrupt.
People in Italy, Spain, and Portugal went to sleep on Thursday, October 4th, 1582, and when they woke up the next morning, the calendar read Friday, October 15th.
10 entire days simply evaporated from human existence.
Functionally, it was an administrative earthquake. Think about how heavily reliant Renaissance Europe was on daily leisures, maritime navigation, and religious observance.
Right, imagine being a merchant or a tenant farmer in 1582. If your rent was due on the 10th of the month, did you suddenly default while you were sleeping?
Exactly. What happens to a prisoner who had a 10-day sentence? Did they just serve it overnight? The authorities just told millions of people that a week and a half of reality never happened.
No war, no natural catastrophe, just a papal decree that cut a slice right out of the fabric of recorded time.
And the resistance to this was massive.
Oh, it took centuries for the rest of the world to fall in line. Great Britain and its colonies didn't adopt the Gregorian system until 1752, and because of the continued drift, they had to erase 11 days.
There were actual riots in the streets of England with people shouting, "Give us our 11 days!"
Russia held out until 1918, Greece until 1923. For hundreds of years, you could cross a border in Europe and literally travel 2 weeks into the past or future.
But Jaeger uses this papal deletion of days as a springboard into something much larger. If a pope can erase 10 days, what else has been altered?
What's fascinating here is how the author connects these calendrical adjustments to a massive theory of historical manipulation, drawing heavily on the work of Anatoly Fomenko.
Let's give some context on him.
Fomenko is a doctor of mathematics and a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. He spent decades analyzing historical chronologies using complex statistical mathematics.
And his primary tool for this was astronomy, specifically lunar and solar eclipses, because eclipses operate on strict mathematical clockwork.
They're essentially immovable temporal anchors.
Right. If an ancient text says the sky went dark during the reign of King X, you can calculate backward in time to pinpoint exactly when that eclipse had to have happened.
Precisely. Fomenko applied retrograde calculations to astronomical events described in classical antiquity, events chronicled by ancient historians like Ptolemy or Thucydides.
And what he found?
What Fomenko claimed to find was statistical impossibility. The eclipses described in classical antiquity mathematically correspond to dates in the medieval period.
So he's saying the timeline doesn't match the sky.
Yes. His conclusion, which we must strongly note caused a massive uproar and is entirely rejected by mainstream historians, is that human chronology contains massive duplications.
It's a huge claim.
Fomenko suggests that ancient empires and medieval empires are often the exact same civilizations, just recorded under different names and artificially separated on the timeline.
He argues that up to 1,000 years of history were completely fabricated and inserted into our timeline somewhere between the 15th and 17th centuries.
A phantom millennium. An entire 1,000 years of ghost history injected into the collective memory of humanity.
And the Tempusnuo manifesto points to a very specific typographical quirk in historical documents to support this idea.
The old dates.
Yes. If you walk through old European graveyards or look at archival documents from the Renaissance, the dates often start with an I or a J. For example, the year 1582 might be written as I-582 or I-1203.
The official accepted academic explanation is that the I stands for Isis, meaning the year of our Lord Jesus, and Domini, the 582nd year of Jesus.
But Jaeger's interpretation is much more sinister. The manifesto suggests that at some point, perhaps gradually, perhaps intentionally, that symbolic letter I was systematically replaced by the numerical digit 1.
A letter denoting an era became a number denoting a millennium.
If you change I-582 to 1582, you have instantly added 1,000 fabricated years to the human timeline.
That's just a staggering thought experiment.
Let's think about the why here. If time has been engineered to this degree, if 1,000 years of ghost kings and phantom wars were injected into our history books, what is the motive?
The author views this as narrative engineering on a global scale. By pushing historical events 1,000 years apart, you fundamentally divide humanity.
Specifically, you artificially distance the origins of the major world religions.
And the text points out a crucial linguistic overlap. What if the I on those ancient dates didn't stand for the Latin Isus, but for Isa?
Isa is the Arabic name for Jesus, used extensively in Islamic traditions.
Right. If you separate the chronological timelines of these faiths by centuries, making them appear as distinct, competing religious currents, you obscure the fact that they might have shared the exact same source.
It's the ultimate divide and rule strategy. If Jaeger is right, we're looking at an administration that doesn't just manage borders or taxes, it manages our perception of what reality has been for the last 1,000 years.
And this requires us to ask a structural question. If time and history have been this heavily managed, what kind of system are we actually living inside?
Who is doing the managing, and what is the physical nature of the space we inhabit?
This is where the Tempusnuo manifesto shifts from historical revisionism into a radical enclosed cosmology. Jaeger asserts that humanity does not live on a spinning globe in an infinite vacuum, but inside a dome or a highly controlled simulator.
Yes, we are zooming way out now, from the timeline to the physical architecture of reality. The manifesto describes a model where the Earth is a flat, stationary plane.
At the absolute center of this plane is a massive magnetic mountain, referred to in ancient texts as Rupes Negra, or Mount Meru.
According to Jaeger, this isn't just a geographical myth from antiquity. It is the literal spine of the dome.
It functions as the central projector, the mechanism that controls the sun and the moons, which move in a spiral pattern above us.
To support this physical architecture, the author points to ancient cosmological texts, particularly the Book of Genesis.
The text focuses on the Hebrew word rakia, which modern Bibles often translate loosely as firmament or expanse.
But Jaeger, aligning with many ancient Near Eastern scholars, argues that the original linguistic root of rakia describes something solid.
A literal, physical, forged vault or beaten metal dome separating the waters below from the waters above.
A solid, physical, glass-like dome enclosing humanity. And the manifesto takes a deeply apocalyptic view of ancient history based on this.
It claims this dome was deliberately broken during the Great Flood.
In this framework, the flood wasn't a natural meteorological disaster. It was a controlled demolition.
A reset initiated by the administrators of this simulator because the human population inside the dome had grown too technologically or spiritually advanced.
It frames the deluge as the literal waters from outside the dome pouring in through a fractured vault.
And Jaeger offers a stunning, highly unconventional interpretation of the night sky to support this. In this cosmology, the Milky Way isn't a distant galaxy comprised of billions of stars spanning light years.
The text argues that the Milky Way is the visible scar of a massive repair job.
It is a 7-layer emergency patch on the broken dome, the luminous trace of a repaired crack in the ceiling of our simulator.
I mean, just look up at the night sky with that thought in mind. A glowing scar on a glass ceiling.
And to back this up, Jaeger brings in a bizarre data point from 1990 involving an Italian geologist named Angelo Pittoni.
Pittoni was working in Sierra Leone, West Africa, interacting with the local Fula tribe.
They had oral legends about a time when the sky literally fell to the earth. And they led Pittoni to a site where he discovered these mysterious blue stones buried in an artificial pyramid-like shape.
The composition of these stones, often referred to as sky stones, is what makes them central to Jaeger's argument.
Laboratory analysis conducted at multiple European institutes supposedly revealed they are made of roughly 77% oxygen and 20% carbon, alongside trace elements.
Geologists could not definitively identify the mineral.
Furthermore, the brilliant blue color of the stone disappears entirely when it is pulverized into dust, which suggests the color is structural.
Like a property of how the material bends light.
Exactly, rather than a chemical pigment.
Jaeger's claim is that these aren't meteorites from deep space. They are literal physical fragments of the original shattered sky dome. They are pieces of the rakia itself that fell during the controlled demolition of the flood.
If we entertain the premise of this enclosed, flat plane architecture for a moment, it fundamentally changes how we must understand natural phenomena.
Take the seasons, for instance.
In the accepted heliocentric model, seasons are caused by the axial tilt of a spinning globe as it orbits the sun. But in Jaeger's simulator model, the Earth is flat.
Often mapped similarly to the Gleason map, where the North Pole is at the center, and Antarctica is an ice wall surrounding the perimeter.
Right, so think of it like a vintage record player. The center spindle is Mount Meru, the magnetic north. The needle is the sun.
As the sun moves in its circle above the Earth, it spirals inward and outward over the course of the year.
When it spirals close to the center spindle, the inner ring of the Earth experiences summer. When it spirals outward toward the edge of the record, the outer rings get summer.
And the equator is just the middle track of the record, so it gets relatively constant light all year round.
Furthermore, the author claims that our official maps, whether a globe or a flat map, are deliberately incomplete. The text posits the existence of off-map territories,
Vast, hidden lands that lie beyond the known boundaries.
protected by strict, mandatory maritime navigation routes and international treaties like the Antarctic Treaty, which tightly control independent exploration.
The manifesto uses Jeffrey Epstein's private island, Little St. James, as a conceptual microcosm for this.
Yeager isn't saying Epstein's island is literally off the physical map, but rather that it represents a visible node of how the administrators of the simulator operate.
They establish zones that are immune to standard legal and moral coordinates to conduct illicit activities.
On a much grander cosmological scale, Yeager suggests there are literal hidden continents where human genetics, the ultimate source code of the inhabitants inside the simulator, are experimented on and manipulated by the system's architects.
It presents a worldview where humanity is geographically contained by an ice wall and a dome, temporally contained by a fabricated calendar, and cognitively contained by a manipulated history.
But the containment isn't just physical or historical, it's ideological.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does religion, the very thing many people turn to for liberation, fit into this physical and temporal cage?
Because the Tempusnuo manifesto claims that this simulator runs primarily on low-frequency emotions like fear, debt, and control.
And its core foundational geometry is the cube.
The cube is presented in the text as the ultimate geometric cage of matter. It is the structure that manages time, karma, and material debt.
To establish this, the author points to the wandering star or planet of Saturn.
In ancient cosmologies, Saturn is inextricably linked with time, restriction, and material reality.
Astronomically, Saturn has a visible, persistent, perfect hexagon etched into the atmospheric storms on its north pole.
And in three-dimensional space, a hexagon is the two-dimensional representation of a cube.
Once the manifesto points out this black cube motif, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere in human religious structures.
It shows up in Judaism with the tefillin.
The small, black, cubic leather boxes containing scrolls that are bound to the head and the arm during morning prayers.
It is central to Islam with the Kaaba, the massive sacred black cube in the center of the great mosque in Mecca that millions of pilgrims circle every year.
And in Christianity, if you take a hollow 3D cube and unfold it, it perfectly forms a classical six-faced cross.
This brings us to the profound theological core of Yeager's manifesto. For those unfamiliar with esoteric terminology, the author refers to the architect of this simulator as a demiurge.
A lesser creator deity who builds the physical universe not out of love, but out of a desire to control and harvest the energy of the divine sparks trapped inside it.
Yeager suggests that the major Abrahamic traditions, despite their surface differences, share this underlying cube-based architecture, managed by the same demiurge.
However, the text introduces a figure that violently disrupted the system. Jesus, referred to in the text by his Arabic name, Isa.
And the manifesto uses the Abjad numerical correspondence system to explain who Isa was.
Let's pause to explain that briefly.
Abjad is an ancient Arabic system where every letter of the alphabet is assigned a specific numerical value, very similar to Hebrew gematria.
In the Abjad system, the letters that make up the name Isa sum up to the number 141.
And 141 corresponds to the Arabic word ilm, which translates to sacred knowledge.
Yeager argues that Isa was not a product of the simulator. He was a spirit from outside the dome.
He was not bound by the karmic reincarnation cycle managed by the cube. He incarnated voluntarily, stepping into the geometry of matter to break the system from within.
According to the text, his original uncorrupted message was one of ultimate radical empowerment. You are gods, you are co-creators, you do not belong to that which is fleeting.
He was trying to wake the inhabitants up to the fact that they are superior to the artificial domes surrounding them.
This is a message of sovereignty that is fundamentally incompatible with a simulator designed to run on subservience, guilt, and fear.
So the administrators of the simulator faced a crisis. They had to neutralize him.
They couldn't erase his impact completely, so they utilized their greatest weapon. assimilation.
They absorbed him into the system. They turned a message of spiritual liberation into a rigid religion of behavioral obedience.
They transformed the cross, which Jaeger asks us to reevaluate, into a symbol of suffering, guilt, and bloody sacrifice.
But the manifesto asks us to flip that visual perspective entirely. What if the cross isn't a symbol of death?
Think about the geometry we just discussed. What if the cross is literally the mathematical blueprint of an opened cage?
An unfolded cube.
It's a breathtaking subversion of traditional religious symbology.
The avatar from outside the system allows himself to be placed inside the ultimate geometric cage of matter, the cube.
And through his consciousness, unfolds it from the inside out, leaving behind the blueprint for how to escape the simulator.
That reframing changes everything. But it leads us to a highly practical question.
If the ultimate reality of our world is this imposed geometric cage, how does the calendar we use reinforce those invisible bars every single day of our lives?
This brings us to the psychological weight of our daily vocabulary, a concept the author heavily emphasizes, calling it programmed resonance.
We are constantly invoking dark, restrictive archetypes without even realizing it.
Every time we name a day of the week, we are reinforcing the architecture of the simulator.
Let's actually walk through the days of the week, because when Jaeger breaks this down, it's unsettling. Take Monday. Dies Lunae in Latin, or Moon Day.
We usually associate Monday with a fresh start, a clean slate for the week.
But Jaeger ties the moon historically to deities like Hecate, the triple-faced Greek goddess of the dead, of witchcraft, of ghosts and crossroads.
So we literally start our work week invoking the gaze of the underworld.
Then we move to Tuesday, which is Dies Martis, named for Mars, the Roman god of war.
Now, it's important to understand that Mars didn't represent noble strategic combat. That was Athena.
Mars represented brutal, destructive, irrational, blood-soaked violence.
So the primary day we shift into high gear for productivity, the day we hold our most intense meetings and tackle our biggest projects, is invoked under the banner of conflict and destruction.
Think about how many corporate environments feel like literal war zones on a Tuesday.
Then we hit Wednesday, dies Mercury. Mercury, or Hermes to the Greeks.
Sure, we know him as the messenger god, the patron of commerce and communication.
But his deeper mythological role is the psychopomp. He is the specific deity assigned to guide the souls of the dead down into the underworld.
If you look at the Norse tradition, Wednesday is Woden's Day, or Odin's Day.
Odin is the god who hung himself from the world tree for 9 days, pierced by his own spear, to gain knowledge. He is the lord of the hanged.
So the exact middle of our week, Hump Day, belongs to the guide of the dead and the god of the gallows.
Thursday is Dies Iovis, Jupiter's Day, or Thor's Day in the Germanic tradition.
Jupiter is the father of the gods, the hierarchical enforcer.
He is the deity who hurls lightning bolts at anyone who dares to challenge his absolute authority. It is the day of established, top-down, unquestionable power.
Then we get to Friday. Venus, Dies Veneris, or Freya's Day.
Modern culture associates Venus entirely with romance and love.
But ancient forms of the Venus archetype, like the Babylonian Ishtar or the Canaanite Astarte, were incredibly complex goddesses of love and war.
In their mythology, desire is inextricably intertwined with ruin and destruction.
And finally, we arrive at the weekend, Saturday, Dies Saturni.
Saturn, or Kronos to the Greeks. We've already established Saturn's connection to the restrictive cube.
Saturn is the god of time. And what is the defining central myth of Kronos?
He devours his own children. He was told a prophecy that his offspring would one day overthrow him, so as soon as they were born, he simply swallowed them whole.
The manifesto explicitly references Francisco de Goya's horrifying, visceral painting, Saturn Devouring His Son, where a wild-eyed god is literally tearing the flesh off a human body in the dark.
And Jaeger points out the ultimate sick irony of this. This is our designated day of rest, the sacred Sabbath.
We are told to rest and restore ourselves under the planetary banner of the god of time, who destroys his own creations out of pure fear of losing control.
If we connect this to the bigger picture Jaeger is painting, invoking these specific names day after day, year after year, subtly but profoundly disorients humanity.
We are constantly vibrating at the energetic frequencies of war, death, hierarchical domination, and devouring time.
It turns us into subjects of time rather than masters of it. It creates an underlying frequency of anxiety.
And as the manifesto points out, the months of the year aren't any better.
Not at all. Look at July and August, Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar.
Two power-hungry Roman dictators who destroyed the Roman Republic, and they literally just decided to insert their massive egos into the permanent perception of human time.
Every single time we say, I'm going on vacation in July, we are verbally saluting the man who marched an army on Rome to make himself dictator for life.
Jaeger frames it as a system of continuous linguistic warfare. But it is important to note that recognizing this temporal toxicity isn't entirely a new phenomenon.
No, throughout history, many highly intelligent people, governments, and even corporations have realized the calendar is fundamentally broken and tried to change it.
So why did they all fail?
The graveyard of calendar reform. This is one of the most fascinating sections of the text. Jaeger calls the reason for these failures simulator immunity.
Let's look at the French Revolutionary calendar, implemented in 1793. The revolutionaries wanted to completely strip away the Catholic royalist influence on time.
They tried to be perfectly rational and decimal-based. They created 12 months of 30 days each, divided into 3 10-day weeks called decades.
They renamed all the months after nature, like Thermidor for the month of summer heat, or Brumaire for the month of fog.
It was an incredibly elegant secular system on paper, but it failed miserably, lasting only about 12 years. Napoleon finally abolished it in 1806.
Why? Because the 10-day week completely eliminated Sunday. It forced a 9-day work cycle before a single day of rest.
Think about that practically. Modern workers practically riot in their minds by Thursday afternoon on a 5-day schedule.
Imagine telling the French peasantry they had to work 9 straight days.
Furthermore, Napoleon realized that to solidify his political empire, he needed the stabilizing, legitimizing support of the Catholic Church.
Free time and rational math lasted exactly as long as it took for political power to need religious control again.
Then you have the Soviet calendar, introduced in 1929. The Soviet Union implemented what they called the Neporivka, or the continuous work week.
They shifted to 5-day and later 6-day weeks. Their explicit ideological goal was to crush Sunday religious gatherings and dismantle the church's collective rhythm.
They color-coded the days, and workers were assigned different rest days.
The result was total societal alienation. A husband might have a yellow rest day, while his wife had a green rest day.
The factories never stopped running, but family life was obliterated. The collective human rhythm was entirely shattered.
It failed a little over a decade later because human biology and social necessity are just too strong to break. Stalin was forced to bring the standard 7-day week back in 1940.
And perhaps the most practical, non-ideological attempt was the International Fixed Calendar, proposed by a man named Moses Cotsworth in 1902.
This was a brilliantly rational system designed purely for efficiency. 13 months, exactly 28 days each. It produced exactly 52 perfect weeks.
It was so undeniably superior that the massive Kodak Corporation, led by George Eastman, actually adopted it for their internal operations.
This blew my mind. George Eastman was obsessed with accounting efficiency. Under the Gregorian calendar, comparing monthly profits is a nightmare.
February has 28 days, March has 31. A month might have 4 weekends this year and 5 weekends next year.
How do you accurately compare sales? You can't. So Kodak used Cotsworth's 13-month calendar for decades.
Every month was exactly 4 weeks. Every period was perfectly comparable to the last. It saved them immense amounts of time and money.
But when Cotsworth took this calendar to the League of Nations, and later when similar versions like the World Calendar were presented to the United Nations in the 1930s and 50s for global adoption, they hit an impenetrable brick wall.
What was the wall? It was the inescapable math of the solar year.
13 months of 28 days equals 364 days. But a solar year is roughly 365.24 days.
So Cotsworth and the reformers had to add 1 blank day at the end of the year, outside the week cycle, to make the math align with the sun.
And that 1 extra floating day broke the continuous, unbroken cycle of the 7-day week.
If the year ends on a Saturday, the blank day happens, and then the new year starts on a Sunday. But to a religious observer, that Sunday is actually Monday.
Religious communities, Jewish rabbis, Seventh-day Adventists, Catholic bishops all formed an unprecedented coalition and raised the identical, unyielding objection.
You cannot have a blank day that disrupts the continuous 7-day sequence of the sacred Sabbath established by God.
The brilliance of the simulator's defense mechanism is almost terrifying in its efficiency.
The system doesn't need to deploy armies or dictators to stop a logical, healthy calendar reform.
It just uses the deeply held religious beliefs of the people trapped inside the dome to protect the very mechanism that keeps them disoriented.
The inhabitants fiercely defend their own cage because they have been taught to view the bars as sacred.
Which brings us to the core, practical application of Jaeger's proposal. If the French Revolution couldn't change it, if Stalin couldn't change it, and if massive corporate wealth at Kodak couldn't change it, how does Tempusnuo succeed?
This is what Jaeger calls riding Gregory's madness.
The absolute genius of Tempusnuo is that it doesn't ask you to throw away your Gregorian calendar.
It doesn't require a UN resolution. It operates as a parallel personal overlay. It utilizes the perfect math of 13 months of exactly 28 days.
But how does it handle the 365th day without triggering the religious veto?
Through a mechanism Jaeger calls the convergence vortex. Instead of creating an extra floating day that breaks the religious Sabbath, Tempusnuo anchors its extra days to existing fixed Gregorian dates.
Let me make sure I'm getting this. It takes March 19th of the Gregorian calendar and names it Amantia.
On the wall calendar in your office, March 19th remains whatever day of the week it is, a Tuesday, a Thursday, so the religious 7-day cycle keeps ticking without interruption.
But in your internal Tempusnuo system, Amantia sits completely outside the 13-month cycle. It is an annual day of gratitude, love, and reflection, a conscious pause before the new Tempusnuo year begins on March 20th.
Exactly. It operates in parallel. And for leap years, it anchors a second day, Gratia, to March 18th.
By tethering these extra days to fixed Gregorian dates, Tempusnuo completely bypasses the simulator's immunity.
It honors the continuous 7-day sequence that the religious institutions demand, while perfectly aligning its 364-day modular structure with the 365.24-day solar reality.
So what does this all mean for the person listening to this right now?
It means you can adopt this calendar internally for your own mental clarity, orientation, and peace of mind.
Without having to explain to your boss why you missed a Tuesday Zoom meeting.
You live in both systems simultaneously. You use Gregory for your taxes and your flight schedules, but you use Tempusnuo for your internal clock until the new rhythm takes over your biological perception of time.
And we must examine why Jaeger is so insistent on the numbers 13 and 28. The manifesto grounds the structure not just in mathematical elegance, but in deeply observable biology and the natural world.
This isn't just arbitrary numerology.
Yes, the science of 13 by 28 is incredibly compelling. Let's look at human biology. Human menstrual cycles, the very basis of human reproduction, average between 28.5 and 29.3 days.
The renewal of human epidermal cells, the shedding and growing of your skin, takes about 28 days.
We also have documented circaseptan rhythms in human biology.
For those unfamiliar, chronobiology has proven that many physiological processes in humans operate on strict 7-day cycles.
Your blood pressure, your heart rate, and even your immune system's response to organ transplants peak and valley on 7-day intervals.
These innate circaseptan rhythms multiply perfectly into a 28-day month.
And when you look at broader nature, it's everywhere. We see the 13-year cycles of periodical cicadas, a mathematical evolutionary adaptation designed to evade predators with smaller, overlapping life cycles.
The 13 is a fundamental Fibonacci number, governing the spiral growth patterns of sunflowers, pine cones, and galaxies.
And crucially, there are exactly 13 lunar cycles, or lunations, in a tropical year.
Yet, despite 13 being this foundational, universally natural number, it has been aggressively and systematically demonized by human culture.
We inexplicably skip the 13th floor in modern architecture. Labeling it M Friday the 13th is considered a day of disaster.
The 13th zodiac sign, Ophiuchus the serpent bearer, the symbol of wisdom, medicine, and healing, was completely suppressed by ancient astronomers, simply to force the sky into a neat, easily divisible 12-month system.
Jaeger theorizes that 13 is demonized precisely because it is the key. The text calls 13 the memory of totality.
A 13-month calendar successfully integrates the solar masculine and the lunar feminine, the external reality and the internal biology.
A system that perfectly tracks time and aligns with human biology is a direct threat to a simulator designed to disorient and exhaust its inhabitants.
So what does it actually feel like to inhabit this new cycle? The manifesto spends a significant amount of time redefining the psychological map of our days.
Because Tempusnuo renames everything, it effectively strips the days of the week of their violent, devouring gods.
Let's look at the new week. The cycle begins with Sorel, corresponding to Sunday.
It is described not as a day of a watching, judging deity, but of gentle activation, an invitation to begin.
This is followed by Zanir, Monday, which represents focus and clear direction, shaking off the underworld energy of Hecate.
Then comes Meku, Tuesday. This is a vital shift. It replaces the bloody, irrational violence of Mars with sustained, creative building. It's the day of the artisan, the craftsman.
Equal is Wednesday, the exact center, functioning as a day of balance and necessary breathing room, rather than the gallows of Odin.
Terrell is Thursday, representing natural peak performance, stripping away the arrogant, lightning-hurling domination of Jupiter.
Elor, Friday, introduces conscious deceleration. Instead of the chaotic mixture of love and war from Venus, it is the profound intelligence of knowing exactly how and when to slow down.
And finally, Tassis, Saturday. This is perhaps the most radical psychological shift in the entire manifesto.
It reclaims the day from Kronos, the paranoid devourer of his own children, and transforms it into a day of deep pause and true restoration, a voluntary, fearless stop.
It provides a completely different emotional map for the week, and the 13 months function exactly the same way.
The manifesto makes it explicitly clear, these 13 months do not describe the meteorological weather outside.
Because if the Earth is a flat plane under a dome, the climate varies wildly depending on where the sun is spiraling.
Instead, these 13 months map internal, universal psychological states.
They describe the natural progression of any living project, any relationship, or any cycle of personal growth.
The year starts with Varus, the awakening. Hilul is the rooting, establishing a foundation.
Kalir is the forge, the necessary period of testing and heat.
Solmor is the extreme summit, the point of maximum expression or sometimes maximum blinding silence.
Zarin is the threshold, the beginning of the turn back inward.
And it is at this point in the calendar that Jaeger reveals an incredible linguistic alignment. Let's look at the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th months of the Tempusnuo cycle.
They are named Zarin, Dorval, Mirel, and Lumio.
Now recall our discussion at the very beginning of this deep dive. September, October, November, and December fundamentally means 7, 8, 9, and 10 in Latin.
The Gregorian calendar aggressively displaced them to the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th positions.
Tempusnuo effectively returns those numerical concepts to their exact, linguistically correct positions in the sequence.
Zarin is the 7th month, Dorval the 8th, Merrill the 9th, Lumiel the 10th. It's an elegant, quiet correction of a 2,000-year-old error imposed by Roman emperors.
And the cycle eventually concludes with Enel, the 13th month. It acts as an annexed month, a universal period of pause and review to realign the entire internal system before the spring equinox awakens Varus all over again.
It's a complete reset.
This raises an important question. How much cognitive energy do we waste every single day operating inside the Gregorian system?
Just think about your own life, your own planner. You're constantly trying to remember, does this month have 30 days or 31?
What day of the week does the 15th fall on next month? Do I have to shift my appointments because a holiday falls on a Wednesday?
Tempusnuo completely removes that mental friction. Every single month has exactly 4 weeks.
The first of the month is always a Sorel. The 15th is always a Zenir. The cognitive load of simply tracking reality is completely lifted.
Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of ground today. Let's recap.
We've journeyed from the idea of a shattered physical glass dome covering the Earth, patched up by the glowing scar of the Milky Way.
We've looked at the possibility of a fabricated 1,000 years of history engineered to divide humanity.
We explored the subtle linguistic warfare embedded in the days of the week, forcing us to honor gods of war and death.
And finally, we looked at a surprisingly practical, mathematically perfect solution for organizing our lives without having to fight the system directly.
The Tempusnuo Manifesto is a vast, deeply provocative text. But at its core, its utility doesn't actually require you to adopt its entire cosmology.
Whether you truly believe we live under a physical dome managed by a dark, cube-worshipping architect, or you simply think the Gregorian calendar is an outdated, clunky, bureaucratic mess inherited from egomaniacal Roman emperors, Tempusnuo offers a profound psychological tool.
It takes time, which the modern world treats as a commodity you spend, waste, or owe to an employer, and turns it back into a natural rhythm you inhabit.
It gives you back your fundamental orientation.
I will leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. If human biology, the regeneration of our cells, The cycles of our hormones, the very beating of our hearts, so heavily favors the numbers 13 and 28.
How much of our modern anxiety, our epidemic of exhaustion, our burnout, and our societal friction is simply the result of a species trying to force its biological circular peg into the rigid square hole of an artificial timeline?
Try tracking your own energy, your own moods, against the 28-day cycle of Tempusnuo next month. Put it next to your standard calendar app.
You might just find out that you aren't broken and you aren't inherently exhausted. Your calendar is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.